question was clear and direct. The woman asked me, "Do you work with Buddhists?" She was asking about working with me as a spiritual director and was concerned that because I was not from her tradition, that because my beliefs may be different from hers, that it may not be a good fit. She was very interested in looking at ways to integrate her spiritual practice, her spiritual beliefs, what she had encountered through meditation and Buddhism with other aspects of her life. And that's a really important thing for spiritual direction, to really integrate what we're exploring and discovering through the spiritual dimension of life with the other parts of our life. That can be challenging because so much in society pulls us into alienation and loneliness as well as competition with others, and our spiritual experience may be drawing us in a different way. So how do we balance that all? And those are some of the things the woman was interested in. It makes sense for her and for many people that it would be probably best to work with someone from a similar tradition, with similar experience, with similar background. And I understand why that's true, that there can be a shared understanding of what's being talked about if someone's from the same tradition. But that's not always the case. Sometimes when people are too similar, there are assumptions that are made, and the spiritual director may not fully understand what the person's experienced because of those assumptions. For example, there was a woman who I worked with several years ago. She knew that I was the pastor of a church in that city at the time, and she attended another church, and she presented herself as, really a church-going person, active in her church, involved in fairly traditional Christian spiritual practices like centering prayer. And we worked together for a while, and as I recall it, it took her almost a year to be able to tell me that using tarot cards were an important part of her spiritual life. She assumed that I would be condemning of her use of tarot cards because they're not really a Christian thing to do. And so we talked about it and we sort of unpacked some of that. And it was very clear that sitting with her cards was really a very helpful practice for her. Imagine her surprise whenever I said, "Hey, next session, bring your deck with you and we're going to start with you laying out cards and seeing how that resonates with you in this setting." She assumed that because I was a Christian pastor, I would look at things a certain way. And that assumption became a conflict within the spiritual direction relationship. Really, what's most important in spiritual direction is that the director listen deeply and gain a full understanding of a person's experience. As a spiritual director, I'm not there to judge that experience. I'm there to try to help you unpack that experience and help you understand what the experience is and how that fits with the rest of your life. It's your spiritual journey, and each of us have our own spiritual journey. No two of us are the same. I sure wouldn't want someone else to try to take on my set of spiritual practices and my spiritual journey. That wouldn't make sense. Just as each of us have our own personality and other characteristics that are unique to us, so our spiritual experience is going to be unique to us. A solid spiritual director really listens to hear and to understand and to help you journey along the way. And that's why whenever I'm teaching in spiritual direction training programs, that I really encourage the people going through training to grasp the concept that what's most foundational in spiritual direction is listening deeply and hearing thoroughly what someone else's experience is. And it's important to not be judgmental about it. Because, a funny thing, when we look at who are the most admired spiritual writers, teachers, in the world today, across traditions, when we look back at these people's lives, we realize that they were people that were often misunderstood and not well accepted within their own tradition. You know, people today gravitate to the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz, Sufi mystics. But you know, there were Muslims in their day and Muslims today who aren't really sure that Rumi or Sufi are really true Muslims. Same is true for Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, who were great mystic writers in the Christian tradition. As valuable as their work is today, at the time, they were under suspicion with the Inquisition. John of the Cross was even jailed. You know, these were people who were not understood because of their spiritual depth. So it's important not to make judgments on ourselves or on others around this area of spirituality. And for a spiritual director, it's important to listen deeply, to hear what's really happening. Each of us has our own spiritual path, our own spiritual journey. The role of a spiritual director is to help you to come to understand what that means for you and how it fits in your life and how you grow even more fully. A spiritual director isn't there to tell you what to do, but to help to facilitate your process. And that's what a sound spiritual director will do. You're not supposed to imitate what the spiritual director does for themselves. Maybe something will work, maybe it won't. But really focus on what's going to be important with you. Can I work with a Buddhist? Well, sure. I've worked with other Buddhists. I've even worked with Buddhist monks. I've worked with people from all kinds of backgrounds. Most of the people I work with don't have any particular spiritual background. That's very common today. And while they may have grown up in one tradition, they don't find it works for them, or they've moved somewhere else, or they've never had any real background, but through a recovery process or in some other way have learned to value spirituality and are trying to put that all together for themselves. None of that matters. I mean, it matters to the person, but for me as a spiritual director, what matters is creating a safe environment where you can speak your truth and where I can listen and come to understand what's real for you. Yes, subscribe to the channel, share this with others, be sure to leave me some comments, and know that I appreciate the time you spend with Spirituality Beyond Borders. Have a really great day.